Election day in America is nearly here.
At stake, control of the Senate, the U.S. House, and of course, the presidency.
We're going to elect Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, and it is going to start right here with the great people of Michigan.
With dozens of campaign stops from the top of the ticket.
It is time to turn the page because America is ready to chart a new way forward.
Michigan in the spotlight.
The whole world will witness Michigan's resurgence.
And Kenton County, center stage.
The presidency of the United States and the future of our democracy could very well go right through this room in Grand Rapids.
Tonight, how the Michigan vote could define our nation.
It is election eve, and we're officially 12 hours away from the day of polls opening here in Michigan.
Early voting's been underway for the last few days, and thousands of absentee ballots have already been cast.
But come Tuesday night, election officials across America will begin the process of counting every single one of those ballots. Thank you so much for joining us on Fox 17. I'm Josh Berry.
And I'm Samantha Mesa.
And I'm Elliot Granite. As we said at all election cycle, Michigan matters.
With endless visits from presidential candidates and attention from the national media, it is no secret that our state will be pivotal to not only who sits in the White House the next 4 years, but which party controls the balance of power in both the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress, thereby setting the policy agenda for the next few years.
Over the next half hour, we'll tell you exactly why the Michigan vote carries so much weight in the 2024 election. Experts we spoke to say it's all about the makeup of Michigan.
Michigan matters because it itself is close.
The mitten is as purple as it comes. A sea of red with high concentrations of blue. A perfect storm that has attracted nonstop visits by both sides of the presidential ticket.
Turn out. And so they're trying to keep both sides really excited and energized.
We talked with Michigan State political science professor Eric Yinke. He says a number of perfect storm elements factor into the frequent visits. Underlying demographics, a competitive Senate race, and even the geographical makeup of the state.
You have the bigger cities, Grand Rapids, Detroit, Lansing area. And so you can visit these places, Kalamazoo, and really affect a lot of votes. So it's not like you've got to hit 10 different spots to go and get your message across. You can really kind of concentrate as to get through the state.
In West Michigan and Kent County specifically, we've seen each of the 4 candidates at the top of the ticket this year. It's anybody's race now and for the foreseeable future.
As a purple state, we're going to continue to kind of be the focus of these elections for the coming years.
For us to understand what's ahead, we're going to take a step back to better contextualize just how close this race is. And to do that, we're going to look at 2 races, the 2016 race and the 2020 race. We know what happened in 2016. Trump was able to win the state of Michigan, beating Hillary Clinton. When we advance to 2020, we know that Democrats were able to flip it. How are they able to do that? Look at the counties that pop up in blue. When we flip from 2016 to 2020, there are 3 counties in the state of Michigan. We have Saginaw County, Kent County, and Leelanau County. Obviously, Kent County, the higher population of those 3 counties, a major impact in that 2020 race. And when we zoom in on our area and key in on Kent County, and we flip back and forth between 2016 and 2020, notice the total vote count. We had 308,000 total voters in 2016 and 360 in 2020. Of those new votes in 2020, Democrats made up 73% of the new Democrat and Republican voters. So they were able to make up a huge difference in that increase in votes. State leaders expect an additional increase in votes come this year. But this is a key reason why. Not just the state of Michigan being a focus for these candidates at the top of the ticket, Kent County and West Michigan has been a primary focus for these candidates ahead of the 2024 election.
Now, further evidence of how important our state is the sheer volume of attention Michigan, and more specifically West Michigan, has gotten this election season. Now, all 4 candidates have made numerous stops to our side of the state, making their case to our purple voters. Let's take a closer look at the 2024 campaign trips by the numbers.
In total this year, former President Trump has made 17 trips to Michigan. Of those, he's made 4 trips to West Michigan. On the other side, Vice President Harris made 14 trips to Michigan. Of those, 4 happened before she became the official nominee back in August. After that, she made 10 additional trips. In total, she has made 4 trips to West Michigan, 2 of which happened after she became the nominee. For their running mates, Republican Senator J.D. Vance has made 12 trips to Michigan since he became Trump's VP pick. Of those, he's been to our area, the most of any candidate, with a total of 7. Overall, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has made the fewest trips to Michigan, in total 8, with only 1 trip to West Michigan. During these trips, the candidates often held multiple events and rallies, and for Walz, Harris, and Vance, some of their trips even spanned multiple days.
Outside of the presidential race, the most consequential race in Michigan is the race for U.S. Senate.
Longtime Senator Debbie Stabenow announced her retirement back in January of 2023.
And now Democratic Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin and former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers are battling it out. And Elliot, you actually spent some time with both of these candidates.
Yeah, that's right. Josh and Samantha coming up. I'm going to take you along on my day on the campaign trail with both Elissa Slotkin and Mike Rogers, bringing you their message to Michigan voters. Well, a third of the U.S. Senate is on the ballot across America this November. One of the most watched races right here in Michigan between Democratic Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin and former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers. I got the chance to spend a few hours with each of them as they were out on the trail campaigning, sharing their message to voters.
Hours on the road.
I drive myself, and I do that because that's my time to catch up with my family.
Days away from their homes.
You know, the person who's most upset is our Labradoodle, Daisy.
In 2 hotly contested debates.
We must enhance and strengthen the middle class.
Our families are hurting in Michigan.
Have led up to this, just 12 hours until the polls open.
I would appreciate your vote on November 5th.
Come and vote for someone who actually gives a crap about you.
Both have spoken at hundreds of engagements.
I know in my bones that 80% of Michiganders just want normal people who make their government work, Democrat or Republican. Right?
Doing anything they can to shore up more votes.
Think of the costs that these families have endured.
Safe to say this election cycle has been divisive, evidenced by their very different visions for the future. Take, for instance, gun control.
As Democrats and Republicans, gun owners and non-gun owners go after the #1 killer of our children in our communities, in our schools.
We got to figure out what's driving these kids to such mental distress in their schools. I think a lot of it is social media.
Another point of contention, EV mandates and the planned Goshen electric vehicle plant in Big Rapids.
5,000 auto dealers say there are mandates and it's killing their business.
You can't make standards for the car companies without them telling you that they can actually meet those standards. And if GM and Ford and others came back and said, this is just not doable, for a whole bunch of reasons, then I'm going to go and advocate and say, look, we got to find a middle ground here.
Their policies may differ, but the pressure to get people to the polls almost identical.
We're talking to those people on the doors, by phones. We're doing social media to those folks.
Michigan's open Senate seat continues to garner national attention.
There's definitely groups that we all know are really still questioning their vote. And it's on me to go to not just one community, but all of them and really try to earn it.
Well, Josh, we know a lot of eyes are on Michigan, and not just because of the presidential election, but also this Senate race. Michigan actually has a chance to flip the balance of power. We know Debbie Stabenow will not be seeking re-election.
Yeah, this is what it's been. This has been the status quo for quite some time in the state of Michigan. The last time Senator Debbie Stabenow ran was in 2018. She is no longer seeking re-election, and there's 2 candidates tomorrow who really hope to claim that seat. We have Mike Rogers and Elissa Slotkin. So if we open up our menu here and go into the balance of power in 2024 U.S. Senate, this is the way it sits right now. We have Democrats with 51 seats to Republicans 49. Tomorrow could really start shifting this.
Yeah, there's 34 seats up right now. That's about a third of the seats right now. And as you said, Mike Rogers, if he flips that seat, there we go. We have 50-50, and Republicans could actually flip the balance of power by just a net gain of 2 votes or winning the presidential election in a net gain of 1 vote.
But in addition to Michigan, if Michigan were to flip it for the sake of to see some change, we're giving this seat to a Republican. If it were to change, there are other states at play that could really start shifting this even more.
Yeah, that's right. That's Montana, Wisconsin, West Virginia, Michigan, of course, among those states. So let's take a look, though, real quick at the August primary. Some people can say that this is an indication of maybe excitement, or they see this as as an advantage. There was a lot more Democrats that came out for the August primary versus Republicans by just about 50,000 votes.
See those total votes there? We could see. Who knows? We'll see you tomorrow.
And from one of the most consequential races to one of the most consequential counties, the presidential candidate that wins Kent County could very well be the one who wins the White House. Coming up, we break down the why of West Michigan. Plus, hear from the congressional candidates vying for your vote to represent this critical part of Michigan. As we already mentioned, Kent County was one of 3 Michigan counties that flipped from red to blue between the 2016 and 2020 presidential elections. And between that and the amount of attention this area has gotten from presidential candidates, we know it's going to play a big role on November 5th. But why? What is it about Kent County that makes it so consequential? We spoke to MSU political science professor and director of the American Communities Project, Dante Chinny. He explains over the last decade, Kent County has become a very different kind of place. What was once a reliably Republican county has become very purple.
This has developed kind of a more of an urban feel, and as it's done that and it has shifted Democratic, 2 things have happened. It's grown, Kent County has grown, it's added different kinds of population, and then the Republican and Democratic parties have kind of traded places. And people who once were Republicans tend to be a little more Democratic now, and vice versa.
He says he wouldn't call Kent a Democratic county yet, but it has become a swing county with a lot of votes up for grabs for anyone running for statewide office and beyond. And at this point, when the race is as close as it is, candidates need to find ways to motivate voters.
The bigger question, I think, for the Democrats in the presidential race is, are there a bunch of voters, and there would be a lot of these in Kent County, who are just kind of on the couch and not sure if they can vote for Trump? Maybe don't want to vote for Trump, but aren't sure if they can vote for Harris. That's a huge bunch of voters that if Harris can win them and get them off the couch into the polls, she probably wins. That's really hard.
So it's not only the county itself that could have impact, but the congressional race that includes Kent County. Now, just as the county has flipped, so has the party in power. In 2020, now Democratic Congresswoman Hillary Scholten lost to Republican Peter Meijer. But in 2022, she became the first Democrat to represent the area in 3 decades. Now she faces Republican attorney Paul Hudson, who's hoping to flip the 3rd congressional district back to red.
West Michigan deserves a representative that can get some traction, that can build up some longevity, and that can, really work to get some long-term agenda items done.
We have a really competitive race here in the 3rd district for Congress. This is going to come right down to the wire, and I have been taking my case to the voters.
While door knocking, Hillary Scholten and Paul Hudson telling voters how they hope to address key issues.
From healthcare to housing to the cost of just getting around, whether it's gas in the tank or public transportation. People are feeling like they don't have enough to even get by, let alone get ahead.
Well, we need to make sure that we're letting the automakers make the cars that they know how to sell. We need to make sure that consumers have the choices that they want to have in the marketplace.
Congresswoman Scholten showcasing her accomplishments over the last 2 years.
I've co-sponsored over 200 bipartisan bills. We've been able to return over $100 million to the district in grants and refunds like tax, Social Security, and veterans benefits.
Paul Hudson highlighting some of what he would do if elected.
One thing I'm interested in doing in Congress is really streamlining this adoption program to make sure that that's a viable option for folks.
The district has been defined by 3 different representatives in 3 terms. Scholten hoping for another 2 years, Hudson hoping for change once again.
Michigan is a battleground, make no mistake. We saw in 2016 what happened when we thought we've got this all wrapped up, right? And Michigan is set. And we lost the state by 10,000 votes. I think that demonstrated how, races, especially these statewide races, can be won or lost by a handful of votes.
We're all going to wake up on November 6th. The world's going to keep spinning. Yes, this is a very important election. with important issues that are on the line. But let's keep a perspective on this thing. America is still the greatest country on earth. I reject all the talk that we're a nation in decline. It's an honor to go through this process.
Samantha, a great conversation with both of those candidates. And those candidates are hoping that the excitement and the focus on West Michigan by the top of the ticket will trickle down to them and they will get more votes. Because we've looked at some of the historical data. This is how we got here.
Yeah.
We're talking about the total number of votes back in 2022 when Skolton was up against John Gibbs, a Trump appointee, some people say placed in West Michigan. She was able to beat John Gibbs in 2022. If we look back at 2020, Skolton was up against a much different opponent in Peter Meijer, who actually voted to impeach the president while he was in office. Let's narrow this down even further, though, and let's take a look at the numbers for the Republican primary and the total number of votes that we were seeing there.
This is really incredible to gauge voter excitement. Total votes there, 72,071, a huge difference, or not much, 72,357 there in 2024. That is difference by the hundreds.
Yeah.
Every vote matters.
It could be very close tomorrow night. Obviously, we expect much more people to vote in the general election than they did in the primary. If we go back to the most recent data, obviously we see that 339 voters back in 2022. Wow. And they're hoping that it even expands beyond that and much more people get out to the polls tomorrow.
And I spoke with Skolton and Hudson, and each said it is fighting to the end. The difference of one vote truly makes a difference when you think of each individual voter. So it's really going to be wait till election night. All bets are off. We just don't know.
That's right. We'll see.
In 2020, we saw record voter turnout across Michigan. And this year, state leaders and election officials suggest we can break another record. So coming up, what's driving that increase in voter participation and why that could have a big impact in a swing state like Michigan.
When the final count is in, the state of Michigan could report another record turnout to the polls. 70% of the voting population cast their ballots in 2020, and we could see even more this time.
Yeah, it's very possible. State leaders I spoke to suggest we could see hundreds of thousands of more votes because of enthusiasm across all levels.
We're seeing that in campaign offices all across the state of Michigan.
In August, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist said they think as many as 300,000 more people will vote in the election simply because Kamala Harris got into the race. But there's also a general eagerness among new voters taking advantage of the multiple ways to cast your ballot.
We're seeing that in campaign offices all across the state of Michigan, people coming and wanting to volunteer and more voters registering at a higher rate, especially more young voters taking advantage of our pre-registration that the voters of Michigan pushed the legislature to sign into law.
In Michigan, every vote will matter, even if you're surrounded by red or blue.
Every county in the state of Michigan matters from that perspective.
Justin Roebuck is the Ottawa County Clerk, where they've had about 5,000 additional voters registered since the beginning of the year.
And I do think that they are energized to participate in this process, and we'll likely see, a very strong, very high turnout.
According to the most recent data from the Secretary of State, there are more than 8.4 million registered voters across the state.
Every county in a swing state feels the pressure, essentially, or urgency, the scrutiny of making sure that we get this process right, that we, have our ducks in a row, that we know what we're doing and that we're prepared. People are energized to participate in this process.
Kent County has the fourth most registered voters and is one of 3 counties flipped by Democrats from 2016 to 2020. But precincts everywhere will still be under the microscope.
Polls have continually showed that the race between Trump and Harris is extremely close. But in 2016 and 2020, polls proved to be less reliable in the presidential race. I spoke to Peter Wheelhauer. He's a professor of political science at Western Michigan University, and he says the reason polls haven't been as reliable in past elections has to do with Donald Trump.
In earlier years was that there was something that people call kind of a Trump shyness, that they were unwilling for social or personal reasons to admit that they were supporting Donald Trump. And so, but then they would go vote for Donald Trump, resulting in, again, a discrepancy between public opinion polls and the election results. From a statistical standpoint, the best estimate we have available to us is the average of all those polls. So that's why I think it's important to look at poll aggregation sites, not just individual polls.
Well, as far as individual polls go, we can expect them to be roughly 95% accurate with a typical margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points. But when the candidates are within 3, that's considered a statistical dead heat. It's why polling averages are a better estimate. Polls also get more accurate the closer we get to the election. We have a link to polling aggregate sites on our website.
A few final reminders. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Be sure to bring some form of ID. If you are in line to vote when polls close, you will still be able to cast your ballot. If you still have an absentee ballot, you can drop it off in person until polls close. And if you are not registered to vote, you can also do that in person day of. Just be sure to bring proof of residency documentation.
The Fox 17 newsroom has been preparing for months for Election Day. We'll have full results, analysis, and live coverage from across the state starting online as soon as polls close, and then on air at Fox 17 News at 10 and 11. And it's clear, no matter where you are in the state, what side of the fence you're on, maybe you're still even on the fence, every vote will matter in the state of Michigan.
Historic election.
I think we can expect this one to be a late night.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.